A poor black boy pays for a Hell's Angels meal, and the next day 500 bikers show up at his small-town diner. At first, everyone thinks it's trouble, until the engines stop and something unbelievable happens. The bikers don't come to fight, they come to thank him. But what started as one small act of kindness soon spirals into something bigger than anyone could imagine. The town that once ignored him now can't stop talking about him. Some call him a hero, others call him a fool. When fear and hate strike back, burning everything he built, this boy must decide. Does he walk away or forgive the people who tried to destroy him? Because sometimes, the loudest miracles begin with the quietest hearts. So what happens when one act of kindness shakes an entire town and changes 500 hardened souls forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The summer heat clung to the windows of Lila's diner like a heavy blanket, making the glass fog up despite the struggling air conditioning unit that hummed overhead. Marcus Reed moved between the red vinyl booths with practiced ease, his cleaning cloth leaving shining trails across the laminate tabletops. At 17, he carried himself with a quiet dignity that made him seem older than his years. The familiar scents of coffee and apple pie mingled in the air as the evening crowd dwindled. Miss Betty and her friend Martha sat in their usual corner booth, their hushed voices carrying bits of town gossip across the nearly empty diner. The jukebox played a soft country tune, something about lost love and pickup trucks, while Marcus worked. "You missed a spot there, honey," Lila James called out from behind the counter, her eyes twinkling with warmth. She'd owned the diner for 20 years, and Marcus was one of her favorite employees. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus replied with a small smile, returning to wipe down the table again. His thoughts drifted to his mother Clara's broken-down Chevrolet sitting in their driveway. The mechanic said it would cost $800 to fix, money they didn't have. Every dollar he earned here went straight into their household fund, helping to keep the lights on and ensuring his mother had her insulin. The regular customers liked Marcus. He remembered how they took their coffee, knew their usual orders by heart, and always had a kind word to share. Even Mr. Johnson, who rarely smiled at anyone, would give Marcus a nod of acknowledgement when he refilled his coffee cup. Thunder rumbled in the distance as the evening grew darker. The humidity pressed harder against the windows, promising a storm. Marcus glanced at the clock. 30 minutes until closing time. His feet ached from the long shift, but he couldn't complain. This job was a blessing, and Lila had been good to him when other places in town wouldn't even look at his application. The bell above the door chimed, and the entire diner fell silent. A massive figure filled the doorway, blocking out the dim evening light. The man who entered wore weathered leather from head to toe, his arms covered in faded tattoos that disappeared beneath his vest. A patch on his back identified him as a member of the Hell's Angels. Scars crossed his weathered face, and his steel-gray beard was wild and unkempt. Heavy boots thudded against the linoleum floor as he made his way to the counter. Marcus watched as Sarah, the evening waitress, took a step back. Her hand trembled as she reached for her order pad. The biker, who would later be known to Marcus as Rex Iron Hand Dalton, settled onto a counter stool that creaked under his weight. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped forward. "Evening, sir," he said, reaching for the coffee pot. "Would you like some coffee?" The biker's piercing eyes met Marcus's, and for a moment, the diner seemed to hold its breath. Then Rex gave a short nod. "Black," he growled. Marcus poured the coffee with steady hands, sliding a clean mug in front of the intimidating customer. Our special tonight is meatloaf with mashed potatoes and green beans, he offered, his voice clear and respectful. Made fresh this afternoon. Rex studied the menu briefly. Meatloaf, he agreed, his voice like gravel. As Marcus relayed the order to the kitchen, he could hear Miss Betty and Martha's whispered concerns. The jukebox switched to another song, but the usual comfortable atmosphere had turned tense. Even Lila watched the scene carefully from her office doorway, ready to call the police if needed. But Marcus treated Rex just like any other customer, refilling his coffee when needed and checking that his food was to his satisfaction. The biker ate quietly, speaking only when necessary, but his eyes followed Marcus with curiosity. When it came time to pay, Rex pulled out a worn leather wallet and handed over a credit card. Sarah, who had finally worked up the courage to handle the register, ran it through twice before approaching Marcus with a worried look. It's being declined, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Marcus glanced at Rex, who was checking his wallet with growing frustration. Without a second thought, Marcus reached into his own wallet and pulled out the $20 bill he'd been saving, money that could have gone toward his mother's car or their groceries for the week. It's taken care of, Marcus said quietly to Sarah, slipping her the money when Rex wasn't looking. The biker looked up sharply, his expression unreadable as he realized what had happened. Boy, he started, his voice rough with emotion. You don't need to. It's just supper, sir, Marcus interrupted gently, already gathering the empty coffee cup. Outside, thunder cracked closer, and rain began to patter against the windows. Rex stood slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow across the counter. He stared at Marcus for a long moment, something shifting in his hard eyes. Without another word, he turned and walked out into the gathering storm. The sound of a motorcycle engine roared to life, then faded into the distance. Marcus watched through the rain-streaked windows as the red taillights disappeared into the darkness. His wallet was empty now, but his heart felt full. His mother had always taught him that kindness wasn't about what you could afford. It was about seeing the humanity in others, even when they looked different or scared you. The diner gradually returned to its normal atmosphere. The jukebox played on, and Miss Betty and Martha resumed their conversation. Sarah gave Marcus a look that mixed confusion with admiration, while Lila emerged from her office with pride shining in her eyes. That was a good thing you did, Marcus, Lila said softly, patting his shoulder. Not many would have shown kindness to someone like that. Marcus just smiled and picked up his cleaning cloth again. There were still tables to wipe down before closing, and the storm outside was getting stronger. He thought about his mother, Clara, probably worried about him walking home in this weather, probably already praying for his safety. The $20 would be missed, but he knew in his heart it had been the right thing to do. The rest of closing time passed in a blur of routine tasks, wiping down tables, refilling salt shakers, and saying goodbye to the last customers. The rain continued to fall, turning the world outside into a dark watercolor of streetlights and shadows. But inside Marcus's heart, there was nothing but peace, knowing he'd done what his mother and his faith had taught him, to treat others with dignity and kindness, no matter who they might be. The rain fell in heavy sheets as Marcus stepped out of Lila's diner. His thin jacket offered little protection against the downpour, but he didn't mind. The warm summer rain soaked through his clothes as he walked the familiar route home, streetlights casting golden pools through the darkness. Thunder rolled overhead, but his heart felt light despite his empty wallet. Cars splashed past occasionally, their headlights cutting through the rain. A few drivers recognized him and honked friendly greetings. Marcus waved back, though he could barely make out their faces through the wet windshields. The 3-mile walk home usually took about 45 minutes, but the storm made him quicken his pace. His shoes squished with each step as he finally climbed the creaky stairs to the small apartment he shared with his mother. Before he could even reach for his key, the door swung open. Clara Reed stood there in her flower print house dress, worry etched across her face. "Lord have mercy! You're soaked through!" She pulled him inside, already reaching for a towel from the stack of clean laundry nearby. "I've been praying since I heard that thunder start. Why didn't you call for a ride?" Marcus accepted the towel, gratefully. "Phone's been acting up again, Mama. Besides, the walk did me good, gave me time to think." Clara's sharp eyes narrowed as she watched him dry off. "Something happened tonight, didn't it? I can see it in your face." He told her about Rex while she heated up some leftover soup, describing the massive biker and the declined credit card. When he mentioned giving away his last $20, Clara's spoon clattered against the pot. "Marcus James Reed!" Her voice rose with frustration. "We can't afford to be giving away money like that. That $20 could have gone toward gas or groceries or your insulin, I know," Marcus finished softly. "But Mama, you always taught me to help others when I can. He needed it more than we did tonight." Clara sank into her chair at their small kitchen table, shaking her head. "The Lord tests me with that gentle heart of yours, child." She reached across to pat his hand, her anger already softening. "Just like your daddy was, always thinking of others before himself." Pride crept into her voice despite her protests. "Well, what's done is done. The good book says bread cast upon the waters comes back to you, though sometimes I wonder if we've cast enough to feed half this town by now." She pushed the bowl of soup toward him. "Eat up before it gets cold." The next morning dawned bright and clear, the storm leaving behind puddles that reflected the summer sky like scattered mirrors. Marcus wheeled his old bicycle out of the storage shed, the chain squeaking slightly despite his careful maintenance. The morning air felt fresh and clean after the rain. As he pedaled past the diner, he noticed small clusters of people gathered on the sidewalk, their heads bent together in conversation. When they saw him, their whispers grew more urgent. Miss Betty, who usually waved cheerfully from her flower shop, quickly ducked inside when he passed. Marcus frowned slightly but kept riding. People in small towns loved to talk, and he had more important things to worry about, like the algebra test 3rd period. Still, his mind kept wandering back to Rex throughout his morning classes. Had the biker made it safely through the storm? Would he remember the simple kindness of a free meal, or had it already faded into the background of his rough life? The school day passed in a blur of lectures and assignments. Marcus answered questions when called on, took careful notes, and tried to focus on his studies. But the whispers followed him through the hallways, and even his usual lunch table seemed subdued. After the final bell, he cycled back to Lila's diner for his evening shift. The afternoon sun had dried the puddles, leaving only darker patches on the concrete to show where they had been. The familiar bell chimed as he pushed open the door. Lila James stood behind the counter, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in its usual neat bun. Her face looked more serious than normal as she gestured him over. "Marcus, we need to talk," she said quietly, leading him to a corner booth. "There's been talk around town about your visitor last night." Marcus slid into the seat across from her. "Is something wrong, Miss Lila?" She sighed, folding her hands on the table. "That man you helped? Turns out he's not just any biker passing through. Word is he's Rex Ironhand Dalton, president of the Steel Dragons Motorcycle Club. They're not exactly known for their community service, if you take my meaning." Marcus absorbed this information, but his expression remained calm. "Does it change anything? He was still just a hungry person who needed help. Lila studied him for a long moment, then smiled slightly. "You sound just like your mama." "No, I suppose it doesn't change anything. But be careful, Marcus. Not everyone sees the world through your eyes." He nodded, standing to get ready for his shift. As he tied on his apron, he could hear the distant rumble of motorcycles somewhere on the outskirts of town. The sound grew slightly louder, then faded away again, like thunder from a passing storm. The other staff exchanged nervous glances, but Marcus simply picked up his serving tray and headed toward his first table of customers. His mother had always taught him that faith was stronger than fear, and he chose to believe that kindness, no matter how small, could never be a mistake. The afternoon sun slanted through the diner windows, casting long shadows across the checkered floor. Regular customers came and went, their conversations a gentle murmur beneath the familiar songs from the jukebox. And if the rumble of motorcycles occasionally drifted past on the highway, well, that was just another sound of summer in their small southern town. The morning sun barely peeked over the horizon when Marcus's alarm buzzed at 5:30. He groaned softly, stretching his tired muscles before sliding out of bed. Saturday mornings meant helping his mother clean the First Baptist Church before Sunday service, a job that supplemented their modest income. Through the thin walls, he could hear his mother Clara already moving around in the kitchen, the familiar clink of her coffee mug against the counter. The aroma of strong coffee drifted under his door as he pulled on his work clothes. "Morning, Mama," Marcus said, entering the kitchen. Clara stood at the counter, measuring coffee into a thermos with careful precision. Her work uniform was pressed despite its age, her graying hair neatly tied back. "There's oatmeal on the stove," she replied, not looking up. "Eat quick. Reverend Matthews wants the floors done extra good for tomorrow's baptism service." They drove to the church in comfortable silence, the old station wagon's engine protesting slightly in the cool morning air. The church stood quiet and dignified, its white-painted boards glowing softly in the early light. Marcus unlocked the heavy wooden doors, while Clara gathered their cleaning supplies from the trunk. Inside, dust motes danced in the rays of sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. Marcus started on the wooden pews with polish and a soft cloth, while Clara began mopping the vestibule. The peaceful quiet was broken only by the swish of the mop and the occasional creak of old wood. "You know," Clara said, pausing to lean on her mop handle, "I've been thinking about that biker from the other night." She shook her head. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, bringing someone like that into your path." Marcus smiled, buffing a stubborn spot on the pew. "Maybe he just wanted to remind us that everyone deserves kindness, Mama." Clara opened her mouth to respond, but stopped. A low rumble in the distance caught their attention. At first, it seemed like far-off thunder, but the sound grew steadily louder, deeper. The wooden floors beneath their feet began to vibrate. "What in heaven's name?" Clara whispered, moving toward the windows. The rumble became a roar, like an approaching storm made of metal and thunder. The stained glass windows trembled in their frames. Marcus and Clara hurried outside, stepping onto the church steps just as the first motorcycles rounded the corner. They came in waves, dozens, then hundreds of motorcycles, their chrome and steel glinting in the morning sun. Leather-clad riders filled the street from curb to curb, their engines creating a symphony of power that echoed off the buildings. Marcus watched in awe as the parade of bikes seemed endless, stretching back further than he could see. Clara's hand gripped his arm tightly. "Marcus Reed, what have you done?" All around them, townspeople emerged from shops and homes, their faces showing mixtures of fear and fascination. Someone shouted for Sheriff Whitaker. Doors slammed shut. Parents hurried their children inside. The massive procession of motorcycles moved with surprising precision, turning down Main Street toward Lila's diner. Marcus's heart pounded as he recognized their destination. "I have to go," he told his mother, already moving toward his bicycle propped against the church wall. "Marcus, don't you dare!" Clara started, but he was already pedaling hard, following the parade of bikers. By the time he reached the diner, the street was completely filled with motorcycles, parked in neat rows that stretched for blocks. The morning sun glinted off polished metal and leather, creating an intimidating display of power. Marcus's hands trembled slightly as he laid his bicycle against the wall. At the head of the group stood Rex Iron Hand Dalton, his massive frame even more impressive in daylight. His leather vest bore patches and insignia that Marcus didn't understand, but the respect shown by the other bikers made Rex's authority clear. When Rex spotted Marcus, his weathered face broke into an unexpected smile. "We came to pay it forward, kid," he called out, his deep voice carrying across the crowd. Before Marcus could respond, the bikers began moving with coordinated purpose. They filed into the Sultan Ansha diner in groups, filling every seat and booth. Those who couldn't fit inside stood patiently on the sidewalk, talking and laughing among themselves. Through the windows, Marcus could see Lila's shocked expression as bikers ordered food not just for themselves, but for every other customer as well. More surprising still, others began producing items from their saddlebags and storage compartments. Toys, books, clothing, all new and carefully chosen. A group of female riders distributed envelopes to wide-eyed single mothers who had been having breakfast in the diner. Marcus caught glimpses of cash inside those envelopes, bringing tears to the recipients' eyes. The scene drew attention quickly. Cars slowed to stare. Phones appeared in hands, recording the unexpected event. Soon, a news van pulled up, and a reporter began setting up camera equipment. Marcus stood rooted to the spot, trying to process the scene before him. The feared outlaw bikers were transforming his small town into something that looked like Christmas morning, all because of a simple $20 kindness. Rex appeared beside him, placing a heavy hand on his shoulder. "You look confused, son." Marcus looked up at the intimidating biker, finding his voice at last. "Why me?" he whispered. Rex's expression softened, his eyes distant for a moment. "Because nobody ever showed me grace like that," he replied quietly. 30 years riding, and no one ever looked past these tattoos and scars to see a hungry man who needed help. But you did, without hesitation. That kind of grace. It changes things." Around them, the morning continued to unfold like a miracle. The bikers' generosity seemed endless, their rough exteriors contrasting sharply with their gentle interactions with children and elderly townspeople. Even Sheriff Whitaker, who had arrived prepared for trouble, stood watching with grudging amazement, his hand relaxed away from his weapon. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the chrome of hundreds of motorcycles that had transformed their small southern town into something extraordinary. And at the center of it all stood Marcus, still trying to comprehend how $20 and a simple act of kindness had sparked such an avalanche of generosity. The morning sun had barely risen when Marcus heard the first news van pull up outside his house. Through his bedroom window, he watched as reporters set up their equipment, their excited chatter floating up to his room. Within an hour, the quiet street transformed into a bustling media circus. Marcus sat on his bed, staring at his phone in disbelief. The video of yesterday's events had exploded overnight. 500,000 views. 700,000. The numbers kept climbing. His social media notifications buzzed constantly with messages from strangers across the country. "Marcus," his mother called from downstairs, "come look at this." He found Clara in their small living room, watching the morning news. There on the screen was footage from yesterday, showing the sea of motorcycles outside Lila's diner. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Poor teen pays for biker's meal. 500 Hells Angels return kindness tenfold. "That's my boy," Clara whispered, squeezing his hand tight. The doorbell rang. Outside stood Mayor Thompson, perfectly pressed suit contrasting sharply with their worn welcome mat. Cameras clicked and whirred as he shook Marcus's hand for the photographers. "Young man," the mayor announced, clearly playing to the cameras, "you're a symbol of hope for our community. In times of division, you've shown us the power of simple kindness." Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the attention. "It was just $20, sir." But the story had already grown far beyond a $20 meal. Throughout the morning, mail carriers delivered stacks of letters from across the country. Some contained cash or gift cards with notes saying, "Pay it forward." Others shared personal stories of how the video had touched their hearts. At school, Marcus could barely concentrate. Students whispered and pointed. Teachers praised him in class. Even the principal called him to the office to congratulate him personally. But not everyone celebrated the attention. Walking downtown for his afternoon shift at the diner, Marcus overheard snippets of concerned conversations. "Those bikers are criminals," an older man muttered to his friend. "Mark my words, no good will come of this." Inside the diner, Lila pulled Marcus aside before his shift. Her normally cheerful face was creased with worry. "Marcus, honey, you need to be careful," she warned. "I know you meant well, but we can't have those rough types hanging around. It's bad for business. Best keep your distance." Marcus wanted to argue that she was wrong about Rex and his crew, but before he could respond, the bell above the door chimed. Speaking of the bikers, 3 of them walked in, their leather vests bearing the same patches as Rex's crew. "Hey, kid," the tallest one called out. "Boss wants to know if you can swing by our camp tonight. We're setting up some community projects, could use your input." Throughout the afternoon, Marcus learned about their plans. The bikers had already started organizing charity events in his name. They were fixing broken fences at the elementary school, repainting the community center, and planning a fundraiser for the local food bank. After his shift ended, Marcus rode his bicycle to their temporary camp on the outskirts of town. The setting sun painted the sky orange as he approached the gathering of tents and RVs. Bonfires dotted the area, and the smell of barbecue filled the air. Laughter and music drifted between the flames. Rex sat on a log by the largest fire, his massive frame silhouetted against the flames. He gestured for Marcus to join him. "Glad you came, son," Rex said softly, passing him a paper plate loaded with food. "Getting kind of crazy in town, huh?" Marcus nodded, accepting the plate gratefully. "I never meant for all this attention." "No good deed goes unpunished," Rex chuckled, but there was a hint of sadness in his voice. He stared into the flames for a long moment before speaking again. "Had a son about your age once. James. Lost him 15 years ago. Drunk driver. Been on the road ever since, trying to outrun the memories, I guess." The crackling fire filled the silence between them. Marcus watched Rex's weathered face, seeing past the tough exterior to the pain beneath. "I'm sorry about your son," he said quietly. Rex nodded, clearing his throat. "You remind me of him. Same kind heart. That's why this whole thing hit me so hard. One simple act of kindness from you, and suddenly I remembered what it felt like to believe in something good." Around them, bikers gathered by other fires told stories and shared meals. These weren't the dangerous criminals some townspeople feared. They were men and women who had found family in each other, now extending that sense of belonging to others. The moon was high when Marcus finally headed home, his heart lighter despite the day's chaos. But that feeling vanished as he turned onto his street. There, illuminated by streetlights, was his front fence. Fresh black spray paint spelled out two ugly words: Thug Lover. Marcus stood there, his bicycle forgotten beside him, as hope and fear wrestled in his chest. The media attention, the mayor's praise, the letters of support, all of it seemed to fade against those hateful words dripping on his fence. Inside, Clara was already in her nightgown, reading some of the day's letters at the kitchen table. She looked up as Marcus entered, immediately sensing his distress. "What's wrong, baby?" He couldn't bring himself to tell her about the graffiti. Not yet. "Just tired, Mama," he said, forcing a smile. "It's been a long day." But as he lay in bed that night, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about Rex's words about believing in something good. The question was, would that belief be strong enough to withstand the storm that seemed to be brewing? The morning sunlight filtered through the windows of Jefferson High School as Marcus sat in his first period English class. The whispers weren't as subtle as his classmates thought they were. "Bet he's their drug runner now," someone muttered 2 rows behind him. "My dad says those bikers are nothing but trouble," another voice added. Marcus kept his eyes fixed on his notebook, drawing small circles in the margin while Mrs. Patterson discussed "To Kill a Mockingbird." The irony wasn't lost on him. "Marcus," Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice overly bright. "Your recent actions remind me of Atticus Finch's courage. Would you like to share your thoughts with the class?" Heat crept up Marcus's neck as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward him. "No thank you, ma'am," he said quietly. During lunch break, Marcus sat alone at his usual table, but he wasn't really alone. Everywhere he went, people stared and pointed. Some smiled awkwardly, others frowned, but nobody sat with him anymore. Through the cafeteria windows, he could see Rex and several other bikers helping the maintenance staff repair the school's broken fence. They had been everywhere lately, delivering food to the homeless shelter, fixing Mrs. Wilson's leaky roof down on Oak Street, and even setting up a crossing guard system at the busy intersection near the elementary school. After school, instead of heading straight to the diner, Marcus walked over to where Rex was teaching some of the crew basic welding techniques behind the auto shop. "Hey, kid!" Rex called out, lifting his welding mask. "Want to learn something useful?" For the next hour, Rex showed Marcus how to hold the welding torch, explaining the difference between various types of welds and their uses. The metal seemed to flow like water under Rex's skilled hands. "My old man taught me this," Rex said, demonstrating a particularly tricky joint. "Said a man who can work with his hands will never go hungry." Marcus absorbed everything, finding peace in the shower of sparks and the steady hum of machinery. Later, they moved on to engine repair, Rex explaining each component with patience and clarity. At home that evening, Marcus noticed his mother's hands shaking as she prepared dinner. Clara tried to hide it, quickly turning away to stir the pot of beans on the stove. "Mama, are you okay?" Marcus asked, touching her shoulder gently. "Just tired, baby," she answered, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "These double shifts are catching up with me, that's all." Marcus knew better. He'd seen the empty insulin bottles in the trash, noticed how she'd been eating less to make her medication last longer. The stack of medical bills on her bedside table grew taller every week. The next morning, Reverend Thompson stopped Marcus outside the church where his mother cleaned. "Son," the Reverend began, his face serious, "I know you meant well, but some people in the congregation are concerned. These bikers, their reputation precedes them. Perhaps it would be best if you kept your distance." Marcus felt the familiar twist in his gut, the same feeling he got when reading the Thug Lover graffiti that still stained their fence. "With all due respect, Reverend," he said carefully, They've done nothing but help people since they arrived. That evening, Marcus found Rex sitting alone on the hood of his motorcycle, watching the sunset paint the town's grain silos golden. The massive metal structures dominated the skyline, silent sentinels over their small community. "Mind if I join you?" Marcus asked. Rex patted the space beside him. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the colors change in the sky. "Haven't seen you at the morning prayer meetings," Marcus said finally. Some of the bikers had started attending services at various churches, but Rex never joined them. Rex's weathered face grew distant. "Haven't prayed since we buried my boy," he admitted. "Couldn't see the point anymore. Felt like God wasn't listening." Marcus thought about the past week. The repaired roofs, the donated food, the protected children. "Maybe you've been praying through your deeds," he suggested softly. "Sometimes actions speak louder than words." Rex turned to look at him, surprise and something deeper flickering in his eyes. "You're wise beyond your years, kid," he said, his voice rough with emotion. They sat there until the stars began to appear, neither aware of the growing undercurrent of tension in town. They didn't see the disapproving glances from passing cars or hear the whispered conversations in living rooms and church halls. Marcus watched another spectacular sunset fade into twilight, feeling both stronger and more uncertain than ever. Rex had become more than just someone he'd helped. He was a friend, a mentor, maybe even the father figure he'd never had. But with each passing day, the pressure to choose between loyalty and reputation grew heavier. In the growing darkness, the grain silos cast long shadows across the town, like fingers reaching out to gather both the good and the bad, the acceptance and the prejudice, the love and the fear that simmered beneath the surface of their small community. The air grew cooler as night approached, carrying with it the sweet scent of newly cut grass and distant thunder clouds. Neither Marcus nor Rex moved from their spot, each lost in their own thoughts about faith, friendship, and the unexpected ways God answers prayers. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Marcus spotted the first news van. Its satellite dish reached toward the sky like a metal flower, hungry for signals. By 7 o'clock in the morning, 3 more trucks lined Main Street, their logos bright against the dawn. "Look at this," Clara whispered, peering through their kitchen window. She held her coffee mug tight, her hands trembling slightly. "Channel 5, Channel 8, even that big station from Atlanta." Marcus watched reporters setting up their equipment, their movements quick and purposeful. "Maybe they'll go away soon," he said. But even as the words left his mouth, he saw another van turning onto their street. His phone buzzed constantly now. Messages poured in from strangers across the country, calling him a hero, an inspiration, a symbol of hope. Some news outlets dubbed it the $20 miracle, how one teenager's simple act of kindness had sparked a wave of generosity that touched an entire town. "Marcus Reed," a reporter called out as he left for school. "Can you tell us about the night you met Rex Dalton? What made you help someone others might have feared?" "Is this a statement about racial reconciliation?" Marcus ducked his head and pedaled faster, his backpack heavy with books, and heavier still with the weight of unwanted attention. At school, students who'd never spoken to him before now wanted selfies. Teachers praised him in class, holding him up as an example of character and compassion. But beneath the surface, something else was brewing. The first sign came when Clara came home early one afternoon, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mrs. Henderson let me go today," she said quietly, sitting heavily at their kitchen table. "Said she's restructuring her cleaning service." She tried to smile, but it crumbled at the edges. "Funny thing is, she just hired 2 new girls last week." "Mama," she said, "I'm too recognizable now. Said some clients were uncomfortable." Clara's voice cracked. 23 years I've cleaned for that woman. At the diner, Lila pulled Marcus aside during his shift. The usual dinner rush had slowed to a trickle. Empty booths stretched like gaps in a smile missing teeth. They're calling us the Biker Cafe now, Lila explained, her weathered face tight with worry. Some folks are staying away. They say... She hesitated. They say we're harboring criminals. Marcus looked around at the familiar space, the worn linoleum floors he'd mopped countless times, the jukebox that still played Patsy Cline, the regulars who now chose to eat elsewhere. His $20 had set something in motion that he couldn't control. Rex noticed the change too. One evening, as they worked on a motorcycle engine together, he brought it up. "Fame's a double-edged sword, kid," he said, wiping grease from his hands. "People love a good story, but some folks can't handle when it challenges their way of thinking." Marcus nodded, thinking of the whispers he'd heard, the crossed streets, the sudden silences when he entered rooms. "I just wanted to help," he said softly. Rex's eyes softened. "I know. That's why we're going to help right back." He outlined his plan for a charity ride. Hundreds of bikers coming together to raise money for the local hospital and school. Show them what we're really about. The event came together quickly. The bikers spread the word through their networks, and soon commitments poured in from chapters across 3 states. Local media covered the preparations, though some outlets focused more on potential security concerns than the charitable aspect. The morning of the ride dawned clear and bright. Motorcycles began arriving before sunrise, their engines a rolling thunder that echoed through the streets. Marcus watched in awe as leather-clad riders filed in, each carrying donations, school supplies, medical equipment, checks written to the hospital foundation. But not everyone welcomed them. A group gathered near the town square, holding hand-painted signs. "Keep crime out," one read. "Send them back," declared another. Some faces in the crowd were familiar, people Marcus had known his whole life, now twisted with fear and anger. Clara gripped his hand tight as he prepared to address the crowd. "Be careful, baby," she whispered. Marcus stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding. Cameras flashed. The protesters. Shouts grew louder. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Someone once told me that grace transforms the unlikely into the extraordinary. I've seen that happen here, in our town." He looked out at the sea of faces, bikers and townspeople, supporters and protesters, friends and strangers. "Some of you are afraid. I understand that. Change is scary. But I've learned something these past weeks. You can't fear love because of who brings it." A cheer went up from the crowd, drowning out the protesters. The bikers revved their engines in approval, the sound like applause in metal form. But as the sun began to set, and the riders prepared to leave, something arced through the golden light. A stone struck a biker's shoulder. Then another crashed against a motorcycle's chrome. The cheers turned to shouts of alarm. Rex moved quickly, organizing his people into formation, keeping calm despite the provocations. "No retaliation," he ordered firmly. "We came in peace. We leave in peace." Marcus watched the riders depart, their chrome glinting in the setting sun, while behind him, a few more stones clattered against the pavement. The day had brought both triumph and tension, hope and hatred, just like the $20 that started it all. Above them, the sky turned purple and orange, painting everyone, supporters and protesters alike, in the same warm light. It was hard to tell, in that moment, which side history would remember, those who threw stones or those who refused to throw them back. Clara appeared at Marcus's side, slipping her hand into his. "You okay, baby?" He squeezed her hand, watching the last riders disappear around the corner. "Yeah, Mama. I'm okay." The weeks that followed the charity ride brought changes as gentle and persistent as spring rain. What began as ripples of kindness spread outward, touching even the most hardened hearts in their small southern town. Marcus noticed it first in the little things. The way people started waving again, how conversations didn't stop when he entered the diner, the gradual return of familiar faces to Lila's booths. The success of the charity ride had planted seeds of understanding that grew stronger with each passing day. One morning, as Marcus biked to school, he spotted Rex and his crew already at work in Henderson Park. The old playground, once a rusted testament to neglect, was becoming their latest project. Rex's massive frame looked almost comical, perched on a tiny swing, testing its strength. "Morning, kid," Rex called out, his gravelly voice carrying across the dewy grass. "Want to learn how to weld?" Marcus couldn't hide his grin. He'd been watching Rex work with metal all week, fascinated by the way the tough biker handled such delicate tasks with surprising grace. "Yes, sir." After school, Marcus joined them. Rex showed him how to hold the welding torch, explaining the importance of steady hands and patient eyes. "Like this," he demonstrated, his weathered hands guiding Marcus's younger ones. "You've got to respect the metal, understand its nature." News crews arrived to film their progress. The sight of leather-clad bikers working alongside local teenagers made for compelling footage. Even more surprising were the townspeople who began showing up with donations: tools, lumber, paint, and enough food to feed an army. "Never thought I'd see the day," muttered old Mr. Peterson, who'd once crossed the street to avoid the bikers. Now here he was, offering his prized socket set and staying to help install new swing chains. The playground transformation took shape under the late summer sun. Fresh paint brightened old slides. New rubber mulch replaced broken glass. Safety rails gleamed where rust once ruled. But more than the physical changes, Marcus witnessed the transformation of hearts. Children started showing up to watch the work, their initial fear of the bikers melting into curiosity. Soon they were perched on Rex's shoulders, helping paint lower sections of the jungle gym, asking endless questions about motorcycles. "My daddy says you used to be bad men," one little girl said to Rex, her pigtails swinging as she helped him sort bolts. Rex paused, his expression thoughtful. "Sometimes people can change," he replied softly. "Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them first." As the project neared completion, the town council proposed a celebration. They would host a free community dinner right there in the park, under the stars. The idea caught fire. People volunteered string lights, tables, chairs. Local restaurants donated food. A group of high school students offered to play live music. The evening of the celebration arrived warm and clear. String lights twinkled overhead like earthbound stars. The aroma of barbecue and fresh-baked pies filled the air. Guitar music floated on the breeze, mixing with laughter and conversation. Marcus helped Clara from their car, noting how she leaned more heavily on his arm than usual. Her diabetes had been acting up lately, but she refused to miss this night. She wore her best dress, the blue one she saved for special occasions. "Look at all this, Mama," Marcus said, gesturing to the crowds of people mingling together. Bikers, townspeople, children running between tables, teenagers serving food. "Remember how scared everyone was at first?" Clara's eyes shone with unshed tears. "The Lord works in mysterious ways, baby. Sometimes he sends angels wearing leather instead of wings." They found seats at a picnic table near the new playground. Rex joined them, bringing plates piled high with food. Other bikers stopped by to chat, their rough exteriors softened by genuine smiles. Even the mayor made an appearance, praising the community spirit that had bloomed from one simple act of kindness. As the evening progressed, newspaper photographers captured moment after moment. Children showing bikers their artwork, elderly ladies teaching tough-looking, riders how to two-step, teenagers comparing motorcycle knowledge with veteran riders. Near sunset, Rex stood and clinked his glass for attention. The crowd gradually quieted, all eyes turning to the imposing figure who had become an unlikely symbol of change. "Few months back," he began, his voice carrying across the gathering, "a young man showed me something I'd forgotten existed. Pure, simple mercy. No questions asked, no judgment given." He looked at Marcus. "That $20 wasn't just a meal, kid. It was a reminder that goodness still exists in this world." Raising his glass higher, Rex continued, "To the kid who reminded us what mercy looks like, and to everyone here who learned to see past appearances to find the truth beneath." The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. Marcus felt tears pricking at his eyes as he hugged his mother close. "Maybe we made it, Ma," he whispered against her hair. "Maybe this is what healing looks like." Clara squeezed his hand, her smile radiant despite her fatigue. Around them, the celebration continued, a testament to the power of kindness to bridge any divide. The night air grew cooler, and families began gathering their belongings. Children yawned in parents' arms. The music softened to gentle acoustic strumming. People said their goodbyes with genuine warmth, making plans to meet again soon. In the parking lot's shadows, beyond the reach of the string light's gentle glow, two figures stood motionless, watching the scene with grim expressions. Their presence went unnoticed by the departing crowds, but their eyes never left the celebration, studying, calculating, their intentions hidden in the gathering dark. The joy of the evening hung in the air like the string lights overhead. Beautiful, bright, but as fragile as the thin wires that held them aloft. The sirens pierced the pre-dawn stillness like angry hornets. Marcus jolted awake, his heart hammering against his ribs. Red and blue lights flashed through his bedroom window, painting ghostly patterns on the ceiling. The wail grew louder, closer, until it seemed to fill the whole world. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He stumbled to the window, rubbing sleep from his eyes. In the distance, an orange glow painted the sky, not sunrise, but something more sinister. Black smoke billowed upward, thick and menacing against the dark sky. The smoke was coming from downtown, from Lila's diner. Marcus didn't even stop to put on shoes. He ran out in his pajama pants and t-shirt, bare feet slapping against the cold pavement. The rough asphalt scraped his soles, but he barely noticed. His mind raced faster than his feet. As he rounded the corner onto Main Street, the full horror came into view. Fire trucks crowded the street, their emergency lights casting wild shadows. Firefighters wrestled with heavy hoses, shooting powerful streams of water at the burning building. The diner, his second home, was engulfed in flames. The heat hit him like a wall. Goss, windows had already blown out, letting hungry flames lick through the empty frames. The white-painted walls were now charred black, peeling and crackling in the inferno. The vintage neon sign that had welcomed customers for decades drooped like melting ice cream. "No, no, no," Marcus whispered, his voice breaking. Lila stood on the sidewalk across the street, wrapped in a bathrobe, tears streaming down her face. When she saw Marcus, she opened her arms. He ran to her, and they held each other, watching their shared world burn. That's when Marcus saw it. Crude letters spray-painted across the brick wall that hadn't yet succumbed to the flames. "No bikers, no traitors." His stomach lurched. This wasn't an accident. This was hatred made real. Sheriff Whitaker moved through the growing crowd, his face grim in the firelight. Deputies questioned Rex's men, who had arrived on their motorcycles as soon as they heard the news. The bikers' faces were thunderous with barely contained rage. "I want statements from all of you," the sheriff was saying, his notebook out. "Where were you between midnight and 4 a.m.? "You think we did this?" one of the bikers growled. "After everything we've done for this town?" News vans began arriving, reporters spilling out with cameras and microphones. The story was already taking shape in their hungry minds. Biker gang burns local diner in publicity stunt. Marcus watched in horror as the reporters cornered Rex, shoving microphones in his face. "Did your gang set this fire to gain sympathy? Is this retaliation for growing local resistance? Are you using this teenager to improve your image?" Rex's face was stone, but Marcus saw the pain in his eyes. Before he could think it through, Marcus pushed through the crowd and planted himself between Rex and the cameras. "Stop it!" he shouted. "Rex and his people didn't do this. They've been helping us, not hurting us. Whoever did this is trying to destroy everything we've built together." The cameras swung to him, red lights blinking. His bare feet were bleeding from the run, his pajamas rumpled, but his voice was strong and clear in the pre-dawn air. "I know Rex. I know these people. They're not who you think they are. Marcus!" The scream cut through the chaos. He turned to see his mother, Clara, stumbling through the crowd. Her face was ash white, her breathing labored. "Mama." Fear gripped his heart as she reached for him, then crumpled. Rex moved faster than seemed possible for a man his size, catching Clara before she hit the ground. "Call an ambulance!" he roared. The stress had been too much. Clara's diabetes was already fragile, and now everything blurred into sirens and shouts. Paramedics arrived. They loaded Clara into the ambulance, Marcus holding her hand until they made him let go. He wanted to go with her, but there was more chaos erupting behind him. Sheriff Whitaker was putting handcuffs on Rex. "What are you doing?" Marcus cried out. "Taking him." "In for questioning," the sheriff said firmly. "Obstruction and suspicion of arson." "This is bull and you know it, Tom," Rex said quietly, but he didn't resist. Marcus stood frozen, torn between following the ambulance carrying his mother and staying to defend Rex. The choice was made for him when deputies began clearing the area, pushing everyone back as firefighters continued their battle with the flames. The sun was rising now, painting the smoke golden. The crowd thinned. The reporters packed up their cameras, eager to file their sensational stories. The bikers retreated, promising to get lawyers involved. Finally, Marcus found himself alone on the curb, watching the last flames sputter under the firefighters' assault. Water ran in black rivers down the street. The air stank of smoke and melted plastic. Something caught his eye in the gutter, a piece of paper, soaked and blackened. He picked it up carefully. It was a $20 bill, the same one Rex had returned to him days earlier, saying he'd keep it as a reminder of kindness. Rex must have been carrying it in his wallet when they arrested him. Marcus held the burned money in his trembling hands. The number 20 was barely visible through the soot, like a ghost of better days. Everything it had represented, hope, friendship, change, was turning to ash, just like the diner. He sat there as the sun climbed higher, clutching the ruined bill, his bare feet bloody, his heart as heavy as the smoke that still hung in the morning air. His mother was in an ambulance, Rex was in handcuffs, and the diner, the place where it all began, was a skeletal, smoldering ruin. The $20 bill crumbled in his fingers, leaving black smudges on his hands. Like everything else, it had been transformed by fire into something unrecognizable, a symbol of how quickly hope could burn. The fluorescent lights of County General Hospital buzzed overhead as Marcus shifted in the hard plastic chair for the 100th time. 2 days had passed since the fire, but time felt strange here, stretched out and compressed all at once. The steady beep of his mother's heart monitor had become both comfort and torment. Clara's blood sugar had stabilized, but she remained weak. The doctors spoke in quiet, serious tones about stress-induced complications and monitoring carefully. Marcus divided his time between holding her hand and pacing the sterile hallways, his phone silent except for updates about Rex still being held at the county jail. When he ventured out to the hospital cafeteria, he felt the change in the town, like a physical chill. People who once smiled now looked away quickly. Some whispered behind their hands. Others crossed to the other side of the hallway. The warmth that had filled their community just days ago had frozen solid. "They're keeping Rex in custody," one of the younger bikers told Marcus when he called to check in. "He won't name names or point fingers, says that's not his way. But he wants you to know he's proud of you, kid." On the afternoon of the second day, while Clara was sleeping, a young woman appeared in the doorway of the hospital room. She had kind eyes and carried a reporter's notebook, but something about her seemed different from the aggressive news crews that had swarmed the fire scene. "I'm Emma Carter from the Regional Times," she said softly, careful not to wake Clara. "I've been following your story, Marcus. The real story, not the sensational headlines. Would you be willing to talk?" There was something trustworthy in her gentle approach. Marcus nodded and followed her to the hospital's small courtyard garden. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the concrete benches. "Start from the beginning," Emma said, opening her notebook. "Tell me everything." So Marcus did. He described that stormy night at the diner, how tall Rex had looked standing in the doorway, and the simple decision to help someone in need. His voice grew stronger as he talked about the biker's return, the avalanche of kindness that followed, and the way the town had slowly opened its heart. "You should have seen the fundraiser," Marcus said, smiling at the memory. "Kids riding on bikers' shoulders, grandmas sharing recipes with tough-looking guys covered in tattoos. It was like the walls between people just melted." Emma wrote quickly, nodding. "And now they're trying to blame Rex for burning it all down?" "He would never," Marcus said firmly. "Rex understands better than anyone what it means to build something good. He wouldn't destroy that." "I believe you," Emma said, closing her notebook. "And I'm going to help clear his name. Sometimes the truth just needs someone willing to tell it right." Later that evening, while his mother slept under the soft glow of medical monitors, Marcus needed to clear his head. He walked the 6 blocks to what remained of Lila's diner. The smell of smoke still hung in the air, mixing with the sweetness of approaching summer. As he rounded the corner, he stopped short. A small group of kids, maybe 10 or 12 years old, knelt in front of the charred building. They had arranged candles in a semicircle, their flames dancing in the gathering dusk. "What are you doing?" Marcus asked softly, approaching them. A small girl with braids looked up at him. "We want the good back," she said simply. "My mama said this place was where people started being nice to each other again." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Without a word, he knelt beside them, the concrete still warm from the day's sun. The children shifted to make room for him in their circle. "Can you pray?" a boy asked. "My grandma says you know how to talk to God real good." Marcus looked at their hopeful faces, illuminated by candlelight. These children hadn't learned to fear differences yet. They just knew that something beautiful had been broken, and they wanted it fixed. "Lord," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "help us see what you saw in me that night. Help us remember that love is stronger than fear, and that kindness can build bridges where walls once stood." The children echoed his "Amen," and for a moment, the warm light of their candles seemed to push back the darkness just a little bit more. In their innocent faces, Marcus saw what the town could be again, what it had been for those few precious weeks when hearts were open and grace flowed freely. The ember of hope that had nearly been extinguished flickered back to life, small but steady, like the candles before them. Sometimes, Marcus realized, it took children to remind adults of the simplest truths, that good was worth fighting for, worth believing in, even when the night seemed darkest. 2 days passed like molasses, thick with tension and whispered accusations. Then, just as the morning fog lifted from the streets, news spread faster than wildfire through the small town. The real arsonists had been caught. Rex's biker friends had been working quietly, methodically tracking leads across county lines. They found 2 men, both known extremists from the neighboring county, bragging about their message to the race traders in a bar. Instead of taking justice into their own hands, the bikers did something unexpected. They documented everything on video. The footage showed the bikers surrounding the men, not with violence, but with calm determination. "You're coming with us," one biker said, "and you're going to face what you did properly." The men were escorted to the sheriff's office, their confession recorded on dozens of cell phones. Sheriff Whitaker stood on the steps of the police station, looking both relieved and chagrined. "We have video evidence and confessions from both suspects," he announced to the gathered crowd. "Rex Dalton has been cleared of all charges." Inside the jail, Rex gathered his personal belongings, a wallet, keys, and the leather vest that marked him as a club president. But there was no swagger in his step as he walked out. His face showed something else entirely: humility. Marcus waited outside, standing apart from the small crowd that had gathered. When Rex emerged, their eyes met across the sun-dappled sidewalk. The crowd's cheering felt distant, like waves breaking far offshore. "You didn't doubt me, did you, kid?" Rex asked softly. Marcus shook his head. "Not for a second, sir." News cameras caught their reunion, reporters already spinning the story into something symbolic, a tale of unlikely friendship triumphing over hatred. But neither Marcus nor Rex paid them much attention. "The diner," Marcus said suddenly, his voice growing stronger. "We shouldn't just rebuild it the way it was. What if we made it something more? A place where everyone belongs?" Rex's weathered face creased into a smile. "A community space?" "Exactly. Where people can meet, talk, share meals, but also learn from each other. Where bikers can teach kids about mechanics, where church groups can host dinners, where nobody feels like an outsider." The idea caught fire immediately. Rex turned to his crew, who had gathered nearby. "What do you say, brothers and sisters? Ready to build something that matters?" The response was immediate and overwhelming. Bikers raised their hands, offering skills in construction and electrical work. Church members who had been watching from across the street stepped forward, talking about organizing food for the workers. Teachers from Marcus's school suggested adding a small library corner. Even some of the town's most vocal skeptics found themselves drawn in. Mr. Peterson, who had once complained about the bikers ruining the town's image, quietly offered the use of his hardware store's supplies. As the sun began to set, temporary floodlights were brought in, casting everything in a warm, golden glow. Tables were set up with building plans, while volunteers organized into teams. The energy was electric, reminiscent of old-fashioned barn raisings where entire communities came together. Marcus stood before the gathered crowd, holding a single brick. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. A 17-year-old black teenager and a former Hells Angel president, standing together to rebuild more than just a building. "This first brick," Marcus said, his voice clear in the evening air, "is for everyone who believes that love is stronger than hate, that mercy matters more than judgment, that we're all better when we stand together. Rex helped him lay it perfectly level, their hands working in sync. The camera flashes caught the moment, but they barely noticed. They were too focused on the future rising from the ashes of the past. The mixed group of volunteers, bikers in leather, church ladies in floral dresses, teachers, mechanics, and everyday townspeople formed a line, passing bricks and supplies from hand to hand. The work had begun, and with it, the real healing of their town. Through the warm days of late summer and into early autumn, the rebuilding of the diner became a testament to community spirit. Every evening after school, Marcus would rush to the construction site, his backpack still slung over his shoulder, ready to help wherever needed. The sound of hammers, saws, and friendly chatter filled the air from sunrise to sunset. Clara's recovery was gradual but steady. Her first visit to the site came 3 weeks into construction, pushed in a wheelchair by Marcus. Tears welled in her eyes as she saw dozens of people, bikers, church members, and townspeople, working side by side. "Look at what your $20 started," she whispered to Marcus, squeezing his hand. The new building took shape day by day. Unlike the old diner's worn brick facade, this one gleamed with fresh white paint trimmed in gold. Local artists worked together to create stunning murals across the walls, hands of different colors clasped together, doves in flight, and faces young and old sharing smiles. Rex surprised everyone by bringing in his prized motorcycle helmet, weathered from countless miles on the road. He placed it carefully in a custom-built glass case near the entrance. The plaque beneath it, polished brass against dark wood, read simply, "Grace changed the road I ride." "That helmet saw me through some dark times," Rex explained to Marcus as they mounted it. "Now it'll remind folks that change is always possible." The name, the Iron Hand Cafe, was chosen by unanimous vote, painted in elegant script above the door. It wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a symbol of transformation. On opening day, the streets overflowed with people. License plates from Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and beyond filled every parking space in town. Local bands set up in the parking lot, their music floating on the autumn breeze. Children wove through the crowd, faces painted, dancing to the rhythm. Marcus stood at the podium as the sun began its descent, looking out at thousands of faces, all there because of one small act of kindness on a stormy night. "This place," he began, his voice steady and clear, "isn't about a meal. It's about remembering that nobody's too lost to do something right. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in another, one moment of grace, to change everything." The applause that followed was deafening, rolling like thunder across the crowd as dusk painted the sky in shades of purple and gold. The new cafe glowed like a beacon in the gathering darkness, its lights warm and welcoming to all who came to its doors. The seasons turned like pages in a well-loved book. Summer faded to autumn, then winter, and finally spring bloomed again. The Iron Hand Cafe had become the heart of the community, its doors open to everyone who needed a warm meal or a friendly smile. Marcus balanced his new life with practiced grace. During the day, he attended classes at the local community college, his mind full of dreams made possible by the Rex Dalton Foundation scholarship. The fund, started by the bikers, had grown beyond anyone's expectations, helping other young people chase their dreams too. In the evenings, he managed the cafe with the same gentle authority that had once made him offer $20 to a stranger. Clara, her health much improved, worked the register with renewed energy. Her laugh rang clear as bells as she greeted customers, her eyes twinkling with joy at how far they'd come. Rex had taken their story on the road, leading charity rides across the country. Every few weeks, he'd call with tales of new towns touched by their message of hope. In his wallet, he carried a worn photograph of Marcus, a reminder that grace could appear in the most unexpected places. One peaceful evening, as Marcus wiped down tables after closing time, he noticed a little girl with pigtails sitting in a corner booth with her mother. The child carefully counted out 4 quarters from her tiny purse, then slipped the dollar bill beneath someone else's. Check. Mama says, "Sometimes you help people you'll never see again," she whispered, her eyes bright with purpose. Marcus felt tears well up in his eyes as he watched this tiny echo of his own actions months ago. He stepped outside into the cool night air, the neon sign of the Iron Hand Cafe casting a warm glow across the sidewalk. Above him, stars sparkled like scattered diamonds, and in the distance, he heard the familiar rumble of motorcycles, a sound that now felt like a blessing rolling across the evening sky. His simple act of kindness had grown into something larger than himself, a ripple of hope touching lives far beyond their small town, proving that even the smallest gesture could spark a revolution of the heart. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.